Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Josh from Kingdom Auto. It's been a while, but thank you for tuning in. Today we're going to be reviewing a 10th generation 2018 Honda Civic. So let's go. So to start things off, this Honda Civic is the brand new 10th generation vehicle. This is the sedan. They came with in a coupe body style, just the two doors, a sedan, and they also came back out with the hatchback as well, which is kind of neat. You know, people have been saying that they've wanted the Honda Civic hatchbacks back for a while, and I guess Honda finally listened. You get all of the new bells and whistles of the new Civic, and yet you get a little bit extra room with the hatch in the back and kind of like a classic look. I know that Honda used to make quite a few hatchbacks back in the day, you know, even when they first started all the way up until, I think, to about 2005, they stopped making the hatchback. They continued making hatchbacks in Europe, but they stopped doing it here in North America, and now they've come back out with one, so it's nice to see. Now, apart from the SI and the Type R, you got two different engine choices with these Civics. They give you the option of a 2-liter naturally aspirated engine, and they give you an option of a 1.5 turbo. Most of them come with the 2-liter naturally aspirated engine, but you do get the EXT and I think the Touring, which come with the 1.5 turbo engine. In terms of power and torque, with the 2-liter engine you get 158 horsepower, 138 foot-pounds of torque, and with the 1.5 turbo you get 174 horsepower and 162 pound-feet of torque. So you are going to be getting a noticeable difference in power with the turbo and Touring models, simply because of that little turbo on the 1.5 liter engine. The economy in the 10th generation Civics has actually improved quite a bit over the 9th gen. So both with the 2-liter and with the 1.5 turbo, the economy numbers are around the same. They'll do around 28 to 30 in the city, and around close to and above sometimes 40 miles per gallon on the highway, apparently. And now we do have to take into consideration the fact that with turbo engines specifically, if you drive them hard and you're in boost all the time, you know, those numbers are going to be out the window. But if you drive them very economically, I think you will be able to achieve those numbers. And that goes for any car, but more so with vehicles that are turboed, because when you're in boost, the engine has to work a lot harder, and as a result of that, you're going to be using a lot more gas. So that's just something to consider with a turboed engine. But that to say, you know, we do have the Econ mode here, and I can report that this car specifically has been doing around those numbers, actually, especially when driven well, and in the Eco mode here too, which is a really cool feature to have. So miles per gallon, definitely a plus for these cars. You know, they're right up on par with what you want to see with an economy car, of a small economy car in today's world, and definitely a plus for this car as well. And I should also mention that both the 2-liter and the 1.5 turbo can run on regular gasoline. That's a really big factor, because I know that with a lot of turbo vehicles you have to put premium gas in them, whereas in this car, obviously premium is recommended, but you can run regular unleaded fuel. So that's another benefit of these engines as well, is that they are able to do that. On to the next topic, which would be maintenance / reliability. The maintenance is you know, very standard as to what you would see on previous generations of Honda Civics. You know, it is still a very easy vehicle to work on. There is actually a lot more space in the engine bay with this generation, which is really, really nice. You know, with the 9th and the 10th generation, sorry, my apologies, the 8th, with the 8th and the 9th generation Civics, they made the hoods tiny on those things, and they also really cramped the engine bays too. And I mean, you're still seeing that in this generation, but the hood is massive. I'll make sure to get a picture of it for you guys, but when you open the hood, you get the whole engine bay exposed, which is so nice, because it actually allows you to get into the engine bay and work on it a little bit more. It's a lot more open, and even though it's still a pretty compact engine bay, at least the hood opens up a lot more, so that you're able to work on the components a lot easier. You don't have these, you know, these big quarter panels, or your fenders kind of really intruding into the engine bay, which is a really nice thing to have. I'm really glad they did that. And in terms of maintenance everywhere else on the car, it's very much like a standard Honda Civic. It's, you know, it's easy to work on things underneath the car. It's very easy to take apart, put back together. You know, very traditional very traditional Japanese engineering, pretty much what you're going to see across the board. So definitely pluses in my mind there. The one thing I would mention is that these cars come not only standard but also available with a lot more tech options. You know, one of them being the camera on the right door there. Every time you go to signal, you have a screen that pops up here. You get a backup camera as standard. Your entire gauge cluster display here, and also your screen too, has all transferred over to digital, or elements of digital screens here. So that's definitely something to consider when it comes to, you know, potential issues down the road. I mean, the more technology you put in a car, the more potential issues you open yourself up to. But that's the same with every car. I mean, the markets are going this way now, so everybody has to keep up. So I don't have any problems with any of this at all. I think this is great. I think this really, really cool big digital tachometer is fantastic. I think this this screen here, the touch screen here that you have is really good. I think the interior is very, very well laid out. I think this all looks amazing, and I think it's leaps and bounds of an improvement over Hondas of previous generations, previous years. I think they've done a really good job with that. I really like being here. You know, it's a very, very nice place to be, and that'll lead me into interior in a moment. But in terms of the fact that there are more things to potentially go wrong, I mean, we can't deny that just because of the fact that we have more technology in these cars. Now, in terms of common problems, fortunately I can report that there haven't been any of these problems to have plagued this car. At the moment, there are only two really big ones. So these are things that you really, really want to watch out for if you were to look at buying one of these cars. One of them is specifically the turbo engine. The 1.5 turbo engine was having problems with unburnt fuel getting into the oil. And that's a really big deal. That's not something to be taken lightly. That's an issue that can cause a ton of problems down the road. As big as the fact that, you know, people might need to start replacing entire engine components and the engines themselves. It had to do with the cars running really, really rich on cold starts, and this is also more of a cold weather problem than when these cars are being driven in warmer climates. So, you know, mid to southern states and whatnot, I don't think you guys really have to worry about this problem. But when we get up here in Canada and, you know, northern states and whatnot, definitely something to be looking into, because that's a big deal. So people were complaining about smells of unburnt gas in the cabin. They were complaining about misfiring on cold starts, and they would also get a check engine light that would appear on the dash because there would be too much oil in the engine, so it would throw a code, would throw a check engine light on your vehicle. Those are three symptoms to pay attention to. And although Honda Canada and Honda USA have released you know, multiple statements on this, when you look at Honda's solutions, you know, they have offered extended warranties, which is great, and they have offered to potentially even replace engine components. That's what they've said, but they haven't released a statement yet saying that they're willing to replace entire engine blocks. So if you know that the car that you're looking at has experienced those issues, I'd recommend that personally I'd stay away from it, and I'd look for one that hasn't had that problem happen to it yet. Because even though there's extended warranties and all that, you know, even though Honda's released statements about it, I mean, why would you hop into a vehicle where you know the engine could have had excessive wear on it, and this will really affect you down the road regardless of warranty, right? So something to keep an eye on. And the second common problem, which is kind of a funny one if I'm honest, I've never heard of something like this before, but the wiring in these new cars that Honda is making is covered in like a soy outer layer or something like that. I think they want to be more friendly to the environment, and that's why the coatings on these wires have these, like, they're made up of some type of soy in them, and I guess to be more economically friendly. I'm not entirely sure, but apparently rodents, mice, you know, squirrels, rats, they enjoy chewing on these wires because they've got soy in them. So if you're looking at one of these cars, just, you know, make sure that you pop the hood, take a look in the engine bay, and make sure there aren't any wires that are exposed or have been chewed, because that can really cause a lot of problems down the road. Onto the interior of this car, and as I briefly mentioned before, I think they've done a fantastic job in the interior. Now, you don't have quite as much space in terms of leg room, and headroom is about the same, but there is a little bit less headroom than some of the 8th and the 9th gen Civics that I've been in before. So there is a little bit less cabin room in terms of your leg room, in terms of the headroom. But what they've done in place of that is they've just given you a heck of a lot more storage everywhere. They've given you more places to plug in your phone. They've given you more storage underneath here, more areas to set things, and they've also given you a lot more of a classier interior as well. And I mean, I've mentioned before, I'm not the biggest of guys. I'm only 5'10", so I don't know what this car would be like for a bigger person, but there is a lot of room here. But the interior as a whole, I think, is really, really nice. I think this interior is the best of any Honda Civic ever to be made. I think the digital gauge clusters there, the touch screen here, even the way they've done the gear selector here, and the steering wheel and everything they've done, I think it's a very, very classy interior. And even with the SI and the Type R, they've managed to retain that. They've managed to retain all those elements, but then they still are able to make it have a sporty feel as well, with a lot more red accents, with the gauge being red, you know, having all those red LEDs there and everything, you know. So SI, Type R, and Honda Civic, in terms of the 10th generation, best interior, in my opinion, of any Honda Civic ever made. Another factor they've improved on a ton with the 10th generation Civic is the noise and the comfort as well. They've changed a lot of elements in the geometries of the suspension, and they've also added a lot more insulation for noise, cabin noise getting into the car as well, and you notice that right away. I would also be willing to stand by the fact that these are the quietest Civics in the cabin to ever have been made. As soon as you close the door, there's very little outside noise that gets in. The trim is really solid, it doesn't move around. Things aren't creaking and making noise and rattling. Like, even though there are plastic elements to the dash and everything, there's a lot of softer materials, so that even if things kind of move a little bit, you don't notice that and you don't hear it, and it doesn't creak and, you know, make all those little popping noises that you get with some cars. You hop over to the review I did of the 8th generation Accord. That was a good example of making tons of noise in the cabin. This car is very quiet. It's a very nice place to be. Not a lot of noise gets in from the outside. You hear a little bit of a grumble from the engine, which I personally really like. But apart from that, they've done a really, really good job at making this a more comfortable environment for its drivers. And they've still retained a nice big trunk as well. You can get a lot of stuff in there. Big, wide open mouth on the trunk, and it's very easy to get a lot of stuff in there, which is really, really good. So the last thing on the list would just simply be the fun factor. And again, across the board, I mean, I know this is the turboed engine, but even with the 2-liter, you still get the same improved suspension geometry and even braking that you do when, you know, over the 8th and the 9th Civics. So no matter what engine you pick, you're still going to be able to have a really, really, you know, properly good handling car. These cars handle noticeably better than the 8th and the 9th generation Civics, and they have a wider track, you know, wider stance, and Honda has changed the suspension setups quite a bit in these cars, and they do really handle very, very well. On top of that, you get good brakes, you get a really nice small steering wheel as well, and you know, just nice and thick. It feels sporty no matter what trim level you're in. And then you have a big tachometer right in front of you too. So let's turn eco off here. There we go. And so in this case too, with the EXT, you know, you get a sport mode as well, which is a really cool factor to have in any car, really. That'll tell the ECU, okay, I want to go fast now, so let's have some fun. And we'll make a turn here, and I'll do a couple of runs here with this little with the little 1.5 engine that wants to be a Lamborghini. Let's see how it does. really quick, actually. That's faster than I thought that it was gonna be. It's a little 1.5 liter with a turbo on it. It's quick, man. Wow, that's actually that's fastest, a lot more torque than I thought it was gonna have. That's it just keeps going. Wow, that's amazing. It's I'll say this, it's very different from previous Honda engines. I mean, Honda's never turboed a Civic before, right? This is the first time they've ever done that. And you get a very different power band. All your power comes right on at around 2,000 RPM, and then it pulls all the way up to about 55, 6,000 RPM. It's a lot of fun. And then the steering wheel, the interior, the handling of it. This is a really fun car. I know that it's not the SI or the Type R. I've driven a Type R, and I can report that that is a heck of a car. That's a fast car. Very, very fun, very exciting to drive for sure. But you can tell that there are elements of that Civic that have made their way even into the economy line of these cars, which is a really good thing to have. I mean, I know that you're not getting a 300 horsepower beast of a car, right? But you're getting a car that you can tell that Honda has worked on, and they've given elements of the Type R, they've infused elements of their racing pedigree into this car, and you can really feel that. So I mean, I'm definitely really impressed with this thing. I'm on public roads, so I can't really have a great time. I can do a couple pulls and make a few quick turns, but you can really tell that this is even on the winter tire setup right now that it's on, so big tall sidewalls and everything, it still handles really, really well. Very, very tight when you steer. It points itself really well, and just a lot of fun to drive as well, overall, to add to the fun factor is all the technology too that I was mentioning earlier. You get the backup camera, you get the side camera on the mirror there, you get a really, really big digital tachometer in front of you, which is very responsive and fun to watch. And then you get a car with a nice big thick driver focused steering wheel, and a very nimble and agile car too. So I mean, this is just an economy car, but if you're looking for something that you can have a little bit of fun with at the same time, this is definitely something that I would look into. It really is. It's a great car. I think Honda's done a really good job. If I'm completely honest, there are really only a couple of things that really bother me about these cars. The first issue is one that can be found on all of the new Civics, including the SI and the Type R, and that was those silly fake vents on both the front and the rear of the vehicles. I'm really not sure why Honda chose to go with this type of design, but I think it would have been far better if they had either made those vents real, or if they had just designed different kinds of trim pieces to go into those spots instead. And the second issue is one that has plagued Honda Civics for years, and that is, of course, that high-pitched Roadrunner horn that you get with every Honda Civic. I'm not sure why Honda has never changed that horn, but I definitely think it's time that they do. So this has been my review of the 10th generation Honda Civic. Overall, I think Honda's done a very good job with the car. I think, in terms of everything that people look for, a nice interior, lots of space, good for maintenance and reliability. I think they've done a great job covering a lot of different areas that are very important to people. So I would definitely say, apart from those, make sure that the engine hasn't experienced any problems if you can. Make sure that the wiring looks good too. These are definitely cars that I would recommend that you take a look at for economy cars if you're going to be purchasing something. The market is very competitive, so definitely do your research, look around, make sure that you're getting a good feel for what's out there. I'll be continuing to make more review videos on a vast variety of different vehicles to give you a better comparison as well. But as for this specific vehicle, I would definitely say I'm very happy with it. Very impressed with what Honda has offered for for not even being an SI or a Type R. You do get a lot of car for the money for sure. So definitely take a look at one. I would recommend one for sure. But thanks again, guys, for tuning in. Really appreciate the support, and until next time, God bless.